Okay, well, welcome to tonight's webinar about the essential role of planned gifts in ministry. Chris and I are delighted you're here. We're delighted to see so many familiar faces. And again, appreciate you making time for this tonight. Let me show you what our agenda looks like this evening. Here's what we're going to dig into. First, we're going to talk a little bit generally about gift planning in the sense of why. Why should churches be focusing on these kinds of gifts? And furthermore, why should churches be focusing on these kinds of gifts now? We're going to speak to some current data and some research that's been done to help you understand the urgency of the now for inviting folks to consider making a planned gift to your church. Chris is going to share some stories of some donors who created planned gifts through MMFA to benefit the ministries that they care about, so you can see the impact of those gifts on those ministries and understand what these kinds of gifts can do to help strengthen your organization. And then I will tell you a little bit more about MMFA's Congregational Gift Planning Program. We offer this service for free as part of our stewardship service, where we can work with you from beginning until end, so to speak, although there is no end for your efforts in this area. But we become your staff and really can help you make sure that you make the best decisions and the best kind of plan for action so that you'll be successful with this. Chris will share a little bit more about different kinds of planned gifts, so you have a general sense of what those are about. We won't get too technical with that, but just give you an overview there, the most common ones that we see folks creating to benefit their church. I'm going to share a few tips, 3 tips for you, things for you to think about as you are making decisions around how to focus on planned gifts at your church, and then we'll leave plenty of time to ask questions and answer questions at the end. So that sounds good. Let's jump in. So why planned giving? First of all, if you've ever worked with MMFA on stewardship for anything, you know that grounding it in theology is the top goal that we have for you with any financial stewardship conversations you're having in your church. And planned giving itself, of course, is an act of faith. It is a commitment with trust that a gift is going to be utilized, possibly when you are no longer on this earth. So it's important before you do anything in the planned giving space to be able to think about the theological component of it. So here you see a good verse of scripture that speaks, I think, in the planned giving space, because it talks about that firm foundation for the coming age. Again, these kinds of gifts that may not come to be until we are long gone. So making sure that whatever you're going to do, it's biblical. Don't get started talking about planned gifts unless you can do it in a way that grounds them in scripture. Other reasons of the why for planned giving, we know that they provide long-term financial stability. If your church has been the beneficiary of a bequest or the creation of a designated fund, you have seen what that can mean for your financial stability. So it's really important to be thinking about this component of financial stewardship. Financial stewardship is also something that we like to think of as a multi-legged stool. So if it's 3 legs, one of those legs is your offering plate, your regular income. Folks are giving yearly, weekly, monthly, however they set that up. So that's one leg, that offering. And then the second leg of your financial stewardship stool is capital campaigns. And then the third leg are planned gifts, these kinds of gifts that we're going to talk about tonight. So if you're not talking about them and your stool is only 2-legged and you're relying heavily on capital campaigns or offering to be the majority of your income, your stool's a little shaky. And what we see in a lot of churches is they're heavily relying on the offering plate to be their main source of income. And certainly right now and into the future for the church, that's a dangerous situation, a dangerous thing to rely so heavily on. So we want you to get that third leg of the stool in place and for it to be a solid leg. And that's why gift planning is important. And then finally, gift planning, the why is because every dollar counts. Everybody has an estate. Everybody has the ability to make some kind of planned gift to benefit their church. Sometimes when we work with churches, we'll hear people say, well, a lot of our folks are on limited income or are of limited means, but still every dollar counts, and any gift that they can make for your church, whether it's a bequest in a will or another kind of gift, is going to be meaningful for your ministry. So being able to explain why gift planning, because we all have estates and we all have the ability to give something, and every dollar counts. So these are some of the whys. Let's look for a minute at why now. Why is it so important for you all to be thinking about this and how you're going to talk about this in this particular moment? So here on the screen, you see a chart that shows some data around different generations and how much wealth they are holding. So that bottom portion of the graph there is the silent generation. And just as a refresher, those are the folks that are born between 1928 and 1945. So they're roughly 80 to 97 years old right now. And then you see that darker purple chunk there in the middle. Those are the boomers, born between 1946 and 64. And so they're roughly 61 to 79 now. Between these two generations, there's an estimated 84 to 90 trillion dollars that's getting ready to pass down to the next generation over the next 20 years. Again, that's 84 to 90 trillion dollars in assets that these two generations have that they are going to leave to the next generation or possibly to charity, which is why we're talking about this now, right? So doing a little math here, if you look at 84 to 90 trillion dollars and imagine that just 0.5% of those dollars were left to churches, that would be 420 to 450 billion dollars. So this is an incredible amount of money that's out there. You may be sitting there thinking, well, the people in my church don't have that kind of money. But again, they do have an estate. They do have the ability to create a planned gift that could have significant meaning for your ministry. So now is absolutely the time to be talking about these things. The other interesting piece of data that I found that's not on this chart is that it's expected that there will be 4.2 million Americans this year who turn 65. And we all know that different times of life, we have different financial priorities, and there's transitional times where we're looking at our finances differently as we age. And certainly as folks near 65 and then turn 65, possibly retire, it's one of those transition moments where they're looking at their finances and making some plans and decisions. So a great time to be speaking about planned giving. This points to the fact that when we think about these kinds of invitations for planned gifts, different ages are ready for different kinds of conversations. And Chris is going to talk to you a little bit more later about how MMFA can help with those conversations. But one thing we do know is that folks get ready to retire, and as they do retire, they're thinking about, again, their finances and making plans. And so it's a great time with 4.2 million people turning 65 this year to be thinking about planned giving. And MMFA can help in this space, of course. So now I'm going to turn it over to Chris so he can keep sharing a little bit more about this why now for planned giving.
Yeah, certainly more about the why now. Dr. Russell James out of Texas Tech University did a huge body of research that was published back in 2020. And it confirmed some things we knew that we had talked about, but it actually gave us data to use to support those things. So over a period of time from 1992 to 2016, he studied 43,000 participants above the age of 50. So for 24 years, he looked at this huge number of participants that were over the age of 50. And what are some things we learned from that? Well, might not surprise you. Guess what? Older people die. That seems logical, but during the time that this study went on for those 24 years, 98% of the decedents were above the age of 50. So I'm not saying tonight that only older people create planned gifts. That's certainly not true, but certainly that's where our focus should be. Who's going to have an estate? Who's going to be thinking more about leaving things to their church or their ministry? Generally, it's going to be folks above age 50. Like Laura said, once people retire, you know, the 60 to 65 to 70 range, that's where you start making plans and start solidifying some of these things that continues on as you age. Other things we learned in the study that was done is essentially about 46% of the people in the study indicated having a will or trust that was written and legally witnessed. It's not enough to have a will if it hasn't been legally done in whatever jurisdiction you live in. And those requirements are different across the United States. The other things is to point to some of the data on this slide. is once a person creates a planned gift with your church, your ministry, more than likely their giving on an annual basis increases by about 75%. You see the inflation adjusted numbers on this. Prior to making a planned gift, that annual gift was $4,210. After making a planned gift, that annual gift turned into $7,381. So why is that? The study looked at that and actually determined some psychology in that when individuals put an organization in the place of a family member, so in their estate plan, your church takes the place of an individual, suddenly they want to treat that member of their family just like they would individuals to ensure their success happening. They want to be part of the organization. They want to see that success come to fruition. And once that ultimate destination of their money is determined, they're going to be inclined to give more so they witness that success during life. It's a very personal decision, but again, there is some logic with that. Other things the study revealed to us is people that tend to give in this way have just a healthier, happier, better quality of life in their golden years. You can see some of that on the slide, some of the things that the study actually yielded with that. But it's important to note here that this work, planned giving, takes time. It's not a once and done. If you think of the picture of a farmer planting his garden, the results of that don't come overnight. This work doesn't happen with that either. The study also showed that the average time from creation to maturity of a planned gift is 7 to 10 years. So you can't start today thinking you're going to get results tomorrow. These gifts take a while to mature. But it is very important, again, the why now. Usually a planned gift is 200 times the donor's largest annual gift. So think about that for just a minute. The size of these gifts are huge in comparison. And that links to some of the numbers that Laura gave you statistically. But again, the average planned gift is 200 times the donor's largest gift in the past. Pretty amazing stuff. And that's why you need to think about this now for the success of your ministry in the future. I get to share some examples with you tonight of people that created planned gifts. This is some of the most rewarding work we get to do at the foundation, to work with individuals that are thinking about these things. You see the picture of Maxine Garrett here. I didn't know Maxine personally. Her gift was created before I joined the foundation, but this picture makes you wish that you did know Maxine. Just a happy, full of life personality, larger than life. And she had a desire to make sure her church wasn't in debt, wasn't so hamstrung or handicapped by the debt they were in. So she wanted to do something to help that. And when she sold her house, she used part of the proceeds of that sale to create a fund that would benefit her church, Faith Moravian, in the nation's capital, so they could get out of debt, help relieve debt, and help focus on the ministries the church deemed important. The beautiful thing about this gift is you see the original gift amount was $40,000 back in 2005. Gifts to Faith Moravian since that time are more than the original gift. That's a beautiful story to tell. Over 20 years, 58,000's gone to that church. And the balance of the fund today is $68,000. Again, compounding interest, the value of keeping these funds invested in the form of an endowment has yielded extreme benefits to Faith Moravian. The other example on this page is the Amos family, Richard and Janet Amos. As a couple, they served the Moravian Church here in North America through both the northern and southern province. Richard had a stint as the pastor at Central Moravian. He was at Home Moravian, different churches here in the South, as well as provincial service. And after Richard passed away, Janet wanted to memorialize the things that were important to them later in life. So their gift was actually created around 2005, but didn't fund until 2010 when Janet passed into the Lord's more immediate presence. You see the statistics about their gift listed there as well. Original gift, $98,000. Balance today is a little higher than that, and gifts to charities since the creation of that, over $88,000. Their gift benefits many charities. Oftentimes we work with donors that want to support multiple things that are important to them, important to their Moravian walk, and the Amoses are no exception to that. On our next slide, it's a different type of gift, but also similar in many ways. Herb Spaugh Jr., pictured here, had a desire to honor his father, who was a bishop in the Moravian Church, who he had seen as a child struggle to support his family on a pastor's salary. And he wanted to do something to alleviate that burden for today's clergy. So Herb started this during his lifetime, and he did annual gifts to fund financial aid for seminary students. He did gifts to help with continuing education for pastors. And then he created a very, very complex fund that would actually receive money over a term of years after his death that would support clergy for the things he did during life: scholarships, financial aid, scholarships for their children of clergy, as well as seeing pastors got the respite and rest and support they needed as they served the churches through parish ministry. So the misnomer on this is the original gift amount looks very, very different from the balance today. It looks like MMFA has done a great job from investment management's perspective, and we do. But in this case, it's because he did those annual funds. He would call me a couple times a year and say, have you spent the money? Has the church used the money? And then he would refund it when the balance got down to zero. And Herb passed away a couple years ago. When he did, we got $1 million of funding to keep this gift going in perpetuity. And then as part of his complex plan, this will fund more in the future, and there will be much, much more money to go toward his charitable purpose. Just a wonderful story to tell, and a wonderful gift and way people think of these things. Here's my desire. Here's what I want to do. How do you make that become a reality for us? So many of these stories, I hate that we can only share 3 with you for the sake of time, but at least give you some idea of how people have used planned gifts through the past several years. Laura?
So now let's spend a few minutes on how MMFA can help if your church is thinking about focusing on encouraging members to consider making a planned gift. We become your staff. We walk alongside you for this effort and do a lot of the work for you, because we know that you all have a lot to do. So this is a service we offer, again, for free, and we can work with you to whatever level you would like. One thing I will say before I get into this is sometimes we do get a call from a church that says, oh, will you come up and speak about legacy giving for 10 minutes? And that's all they want MMFA to do to help them. And certainly we can speak about planned gifts, but really for it to be ultimately successful, there's a lot more that needs to go into it. And so our program, ideally, we're walking with you for at least a year, if not more than that, to help, again, make it the third leg of your financial stewardship stool. So if you are thinking about offering this as something at your church, the first thing you need to do is consider who's going to be involved. Perhaps you have a stewardship committee and it logically fits with them. If you don't have a stewardship committee, it might be trustees, it might be a unified board, joint board, however your church is structured, you need to determine who's going to be involved in planning and executing and assessing this effort. And again, making sure that it's an ongoing thing. So once you've figured that out, then it's time to think a little bit about what these folks who are going to lead this conversation need to consider. So one of the things they need to think about is past efforts. Has your church ever educated the congregation on planned gifts, talked about them in any way? And if so, what happened when you did that? Were those efforts successful? Did you learn anything you need to be thinking about now? Were there any stumbles there that are important to consider as you make decisions? So just taking some time to reflect on any past efforts, specifically around inviting planned gifts, and making sure there's no lessons there or successes there you want to build on that should factor into what you do now. Second thing to be thinking about is the timing. If your church has sort of an ongoing stewardship cycle or steps that it takes every year around financial stewardship especially, then you want to think about what's our timing for talking about planned gifts. Can we fold it into that sort of offering plate type of invitation that we might be making, or does it need to be at a different time? A lot of the churches that we work with for the gift planning focus kick it off in January or February, because that's sometimes a quieter time in our churches, and certainly folks have already made decisions about charitable gifts for the year prior to coming in. So it might be a good time to be thinking about launching something. And again, MMFA can help you figure that out. Finally, you want to consider any obstacles that might exist to a planned giving effort. So we do know from our own work and from data that if a church is already really struggling to get people to give via the plate or how the sort of annual giving, if that's already hard and folks are not doing that, they are not necessarily likely to create a planned gift to benefit your ministry. So it's worth first saying, okay, why are we having some struggles right now with our ongoing offering giving before you launch into a planned gift conversation. Other obstacles just might be general culture, church climate. If folks are really anxious, perhaps you don't have a pastor right now, or folks are feeling like membership is dropping. That doesn't necessarily mean you can't talk about planned gifts, but it's important to identify that and factor that in as you create your action plan. Again, MMFA can help as we hear those obstacles, give you advice on what we know to work to help overcome them so that they don't stop you from this effort. So once your folks have been identified who are going to lead this and they've had some time to think through some of these considerations, then let's look at sort of the phases that MMFA encourages you to go through. The first one is planning. Again, this is not an ATM. It doesn't happen overnight. It's worth the time to really put some thought into it. So first thing you see here is vision. What kind of vision does your church have? We always say that your vision should be bigger than your budget. Your vision should be bigger than any planned gift you hope to get. So if you are going to invite me to create a bequest to benefit Clemens Moravian Church, show me the vision that you have. What am I going to help you accomplish by creating a planned gift for the church? So having that big vision, this is what we hope to do as a ministry. This is our mission, the impact we want to have, and here's how these planned gifts are going to help. It's really, really important. We have a tool that can help you, help your leadership group create a concise statement that can help support having a vision for this effort. So be happy to share that if that would be of help. Second thing to think about are your existing funds. Do you have some endowments already? What are they for? What does the congregation need to know about them? How designated are they, and what are they utilized for? And are there any new funds that you wish that you had? Some of our churches that we work with say we don't want to just encourage unrestricted gifts, although that certainly is what we advise, because those are the ones that you can use 30 years from now, which we have no idea what it will look like. But if you feel like you've got folks in the congregation that for a planned gift really want to be able to direct it to a specific area, we can help you identify those different areas. So one of the churches we work with here locally created a fund that they called the Good Neighbor Fund. And it was a way for them to get planned gifts that would help with their missional outreach efforts well into the future. It didn't have a lot of specifics on it other than it would be used to serve those in the immediate neighborhood, those in the community, those who were part of the city. So again, there's different ways you can approach this, and it's worth spending some time to say, what do we hope to do here? Are there specific ministries that folks really love at our church that we think that they would respond to and create a planned gift to benefit, or do we want to just go for unrestricted, a general endowment? If you don't even have an endowment yet, we can help give you tips on how to set that up. So conversation about funds is really critical before you get started. Next, it's also important to have policies in place. What kind of gifts are you willing to accept? Are there any that you don't want to accept? This gives you room to be able to say no to something, and sometimes a gift is not always a gift. And Chris can tell you lots of stories about churches that call us because they've received an asset that turns out to be really not a gift, and they are having to do a lot of work to figure out what to do with it. So if you've got gift acceptance policies in place, then you can say no to things. These policies also help give your program structure. They can identify, hey, if we get an undesignated bequest, here's what's going to happen with it. And the trustees or whomever makes those decisions can review that periodically. So you're giving your congregation confidence that if they create a bequest or any other kind of planned gift to benefit your ministry, that it's going to be handled appropriately and that they can do so knowing that they are clear that it will go to whatever they articulate that it will go for. And also, again, give some accountability. So let folks know, okay, who's going to be overseeing these gifts as they come in and what are they going to do with them. So policies are important. Some of you on this call have received samples of those from us in the recent past. So we're always happy to provide what folks have already created so you're not having to start from scratch if you don't already have them. Next, past planned gifts. Again, have we been the beneficiary of someone's generosity in the past? And if so, is that a story we can tell? I think sometimes churches tend to tell the story in the moment, and then 20 years go by, and the church has received $50,000 from a fund, and you've got new members sitting there who may not know anything about this generous gift. You've got some who may have gotten misinformation or forgotten. So worth some time to create those impact stories and make them a part of your plan for how are we going to share these with folks. And then finally, you want to have goals identified. We hope to have what be the results of this effort. Some churches we work with say we're going to, on our pledge card, we're going to include a line that says, yes, I've included Unity Moravian Church in my estate plans, and all they want to do is learn that maybe at least 10 of their giving units have done that. So they're not looking for specifics. They just want to get a sense of how many planned gifts are in the pipeline for us. Some churches say we get more specific, and they say we really want at least one person to create a fund that will benefit our ministry. So again, it really depends on your leadership and what direction you hope to go with these efforts, but we can help with some realistic goal setting. And we can also help create materials. So you'll inevitably need some information, brochure, flyer, however that looks, a brief, whatever you need, we can help you with the creation of that so that you've got the right materials to put in people's hands at the right time. So this planning phase, common question is how long does that take? That's a lot to do. It takes several months. You can't do all this in one meeting, but again, we can work with you on this. I would say for most churches, if folks are all in and they've got a clearly defined group that wants to own this and is willing to designate the time to it, this can usually take 3 or 4 months. Some churches it takes longer than that. So it just really depends on who your folks are that are around the table having the conversation. Second phase is your invitation phase. So during this phase, you are telling the world about this thing that's called the planned giving and why they need to be considering them and how vital those gifts are to your ministry. So here you see some different things that are important in the invitation phase. First and foremost, you have a lot of channels that you use at your church to communicate with people. You should be utilizing all those channels for your planned giving effort. Misstep that we've seen before is a church that will get up and make a really great announcement during worship and then not have any kind of email or information that's a follow-up for those folks who didn't happen to be in worship that day. So just making sure you've identified all those different channels and that you're putting that planned giving information as many places as possible. You definitely want to have everything that you communicate on your website so it's easy for folks to find. One of the goals could be that somebody is going to end up with their lawyer one day working on this planned gift to benefit Central Moravian Church, and you want them to be able to easily find whatever they might need in that conversation with their lawyer. So having stuff on your website is really critical there. Also, during the invitation phase, you are getting personal. What does that mean? You yourself might be sharing your reason for why you've created a planned gift to benefit your church. I know for some people that makes us uncomfortable, but there's power in being able to stand up and give your own why for this planned gift. So being able to share that reason is important. The other way we can get personal during this time is to have one-on-one conversations about this kind of giving. Again, knowing that not everybody, every stage of life is ready for every kind of planned giving conversation. MMFA can help facilitate these. Chris will share more about that when he talks about the different kinds of gifts, but we're willing to come and be a professional on site if folks want to make appointments with us and get advice on their situation and share their goals and see what kind of gift is right for me. That's something that we can offer free of charge for people. So again, getting personal with people and really not just doing a big announcement during church or sending a letter in the mail, but making it as personal as possible is really powerful. Also, remembering the church's why. That's twofold. Why plan gifts? Why should I take the time to include Clemens Moravian Church in my will? But also why the church matters as a ministry. What are you up to? What impact are you having? What's your mission, your vision? And how are these plan gifts going to help you with all of that? So I can't overuse the word why as you're thinking about these conversations. So keeping that church why in front of folks for any aspect of stewardship is really, really important. Again, we've touched on a little bit specific messages for specific audiences. Folks 70 or older might want to consider a gift annuity. Folks who are my age in their late 40s might just need a general estate planning message. So let MMFA help you identify those different kinds of messages for your different age groups or different life stage folks, so that you can not just be trying to appeal to everybody with the same language and the same message. And then finally, celebration is something that we tend to forget about with financial stewardship of any kind. How do we celebrate generosity? And especially that past generosity. If you've got some planned gifts that have been benefiting your church now for several years, having a moment, again, to tell that impact story, to really celebrate what that's meant for your congregation is really important during this invitation phase. So you're not just inviting people to make their own gifts, you're also celebrating any of those past planned gifts that have come through. And then finally, our third phase for this effort when MMFA helps with planned giving for your church is this third leg. Again, you don't want your stool, your financial stewardship stool, to be wobbly. So how can we make sure that this leg is in place on the stool, it's healthy, and it's going to stay there? This won't just be something that you talked about in 2025, and then you have a new round of leaders 10 years from now having no memory or recollection of planned giving being a thing at your church. So MMFA likes to work with you to identify how are you going forward as these new gifts come in, how will you recognize them and how will you celebrate them? And sometimes that may depend on the donor. Some folks say this is an anonymous bequest that they're leaving. They don't want it shared with the congregation, their name to be known, and others don't mind. So a lot of times our churches in their policies will have language to say if a donor hasn't asked to be anonymous, we are going to share who they are and what their gift could do, not the amount necessarily, but how it could be utilized for impact, especially if they've designated it. So having that plan in place to recognize gifts and celebrate them. A church that we worked with several years ago said anytime we get a new bequest that comes in, we're going to have a candle in the sanctuary and we will light it on Sunday during worship. And they educated the congregation. They had a blurb in the bulletin so folks knew if they came in and they saw that candle burning, that somebody had remembered the church in their will. And I think that's a beautiful visual, the flame burning and keeping that flame of the ministry of your church burning. So there's all kinds of ways that you can recognize and celebrate gifts. And we love to have that already in place before you even start asking for them. How are you going to assess these efforts a year from now? How are you going to say, what did we do and how successful were we? So it's important to have some measurements here, and MMFA can help you identify the right ones so that you can gauge how successful you've been. Again, if this is not an instant business where you're going to know always how many gifts might come in the future, but you could have a sense of that depending on those goals you set. So we can work to identify that. Another thing that's important to keep this going is to say, how are we going to keep communicating it in an ongoing, intentional way? So maybe that's saying every quarter we're going to do something. There's certain times a year where it's great to be educating people on certain kinds of planned giving, and MMFA can help with that. We can even write articles for you. So use us as much as you'd like to help make sure that this communication is still happening well into the future. And then finally, we can work with you to help see, is there additional education that's needed? Again, we can come up and do workshops. Those are not always wildly popular. It just depends. Sometimes folks hear planned giving workshop and they just think about their own death. There's actually been research around that. If people see a flyer about a planned giving workshop, that their brain automatically sees sort of a skeleton and, oh, I'm talking about my death. But we can help you identify if there's any additional education that should take place and how to get it in front of folks that they can learn everything they need to make the right kind of planned gift for your church. So speaking of planned gifts, I'm going to let Chris tell you a little bit more about the different types of gifts.
Yeah, the different types of gifts. Don't get wrapped up in the word salad that this becomes really, really quickly. we're our own worst enemy with this, with a lot of acronyms and different types of ways to do planned giving. This is the how, it's never the what or why. A lot of times Moravians will call our foundation and they'll say, we want to do X. They know the why, they know the what, they just need help facilitating that and making it become a reality. This part can also be extremely personal and become highly complex very, very quickly. And we don't have time to get into the details of all these different types of gifts tonight. I did want to mention more something Laura referenced earlier, an example that I did recently with a church, actually not locally, where I spoke about gift planning on a Sunday following worship just briefly. They had a nice lunch, so that got people to come. Moravians like food, like all of us, and they'll come for a good meal, listen to a planned giving spiel that's short and not in between them and a football game or something like that. And they had the opportunity at that luncheon to sign up for a one-on-one conversation with me a month later. And I got to go back to the church 30 days later and meet with just individuals or couples to explore their personal financial situation and how they could support the church now or in the future. And it was just a great conversation. But I find Moravians are very, very private about this stuff. And but they liked that uninterested party, not their church member they're having this conversation with, but they could explore how to support their church into the future. It's just a great opportunity. And again, part of the added service we do for free to help support this kind of work. We've divided the types of planned gifts into two categories on this slide: split interest gifts and direct gifts. So what's the difference? Split interest gifts really represent gifts where a portion benefits an individual or individuals, and then there's a portion that also benefits charity. Often these appear in Moravian circles as charitable gift annuities or charitable remainder trust. These are, again, gifts that are paying an individual during the individual's lifetime, but at the end of the term, the balance goes to the church or ministries that are important to them. They could also go on to fund a named fund or endowment or some other type of gift, which leads us into direct gifts, which include named funds, endowments, estate transfers. A direct gift's just passing, could be cash to someone else. You could name your church in your will. That gift, when you enter the Lord's more immediate presence, goes directly to them. The other thing is the structured type of gifts, which would pay organizations for perpetuity or term of years or for specific causes. We see those come into play a lot more if people are paying multiple beneficiaries. Maybe they're concerned that something could happen to one of the organizations they've named, or they want, in our case, a trustee to oversee the gift and make sure it's used for their purpose over the period of time. So how do you know which one's right, which ones to use? Part of the time, it could depend on the age of the beneficiaries on the split interest gifts. The funding amount could play into that, how much money they're putting toward the gift. And gift annuities are often structured for smaller amounts, but the beneficiaries in our case must be at least 70 years old, because of those are a guaranteed contract, guaranteed payment stream for the individual. So to kind of hedge the liability and the person living for 50 or 60 or 70 more years, we do have to structure those primarily for those north of 70 years old. For charitable remainder trusts, those are legal trusts. They're a legal entity that's created. Our foundation pays for the legal costs to do that. And because of that, the structure, the tax returns that are required on an annual basis, we do like to see those be larger gifts. And our minimum in that case is around $100,000 versus the minimum for a gift annuity is $10,000. So a much smaller entry point. Those gifts work really, really well if someone has an asset that's not producing anything for them. Either it's stock they've owned for years, they don't get dividends. Maybe it's real estate they own that they just don't need anymore. They don't use that vacation home that they don't go to anymore. or other types of assets, and they can turn them into income producing assets through these vehicles and then benefit their church at the end of the term. Great uses of that. And again, direct gifts are those gifts that go out directly through bequest or create a structured gift, usually at some period of time in the future. That's a very, very high level approach of the different types of planned gifts. You can hear DAF, CRT, and DAF's donor advised fund. All those can be used. Those are a type of direct gift. And oftentimes those are used very early in the planning phase and turn into some other type of gift. We could spend entire hours talking about any one of the types of planned gifts. But again, it gets complex really quickly. It's personal really quickly. And it's about what that individual needs and wants to do. And we help you take the time to analyze that and have those conversations with the individuals so their gift's successful and meets what they're trying to do at the end of the day. Laura, bring it home for us.
Thanks, Chris. Last thing we want to talk about before we open up time for questions and conversation are the top 3 tips that we have for you tonight around gift planning efforts. First and foremost, make it easy and make it accessible for people. Again, as you think about your own response to considering a planned gift and your estate planning, all that, that can be overwhelming and something that a lot of us want to avoid. So your goal here is to make this as easy and accessible as possible. Specifically, what does that mean? That means really clear information, whether that's your gift acceptance policies or your confidentiality policy or what the church is going to do when it receives an undesignated planned gift. Any of that kind of language needs to be as clear as possible. MMFA is always happy if you've drafted something or you've got existing policies and you want a third party to review them and let you know where you could perhaps add some clarity. We're happy to do that. So just let us know and send them our way, and we can help make them as clear as possible. Also, you want to make stuff, of course, easy to find. Again, that's on your website. That's print wherever people might find it in print within your church facility. So where are these materials going to live and how do people know where they are and how to get them? I think the other thing that's helpful to do here is also to make sure that you're using consistent messaging across any place that you're talking about planned giving. So as you come up with that vision and that here's what these gifts are going to help us do, that impact and the why, making sure that that message is the same across all the different places that you are making the materials accessible. So finally, I think one of the ways you can make this easy is to share samples with people. We can give you sample language that you can put in your will to benefit Ex Moravian Church, whatever that is. Having that kind of stuff available for people so that it's as simple for them to do as possible is really critical. Second thing you see here is to engage your key leaders. What does that mean? That means start with your board. If your board agrees, let's talk about planned gifts and encourage people to consider them. First, work to get your board to consider them. It's lovely to be able to say, hey, our board really believes in this. We want to educate and invite you with us for this. And so it's nice to have people on the board that have already left the church in their will or created a planned gift. So start there and try to get them engaged to lead by example and even to share their own why for why they created the kind of gift that they did. This again can be hard for people because we want to be private about these kinds of generous gifts, and we don't want to seem like we're bragging about them. But I think just having a simple ability to say our board is all in on this, they're considering their own planned gifts, that kind of thing can be really meaningful for people. I also think it's really important that everybody at the board level is in the know about what you're going to do. So again, if you're on a stewardship committee and this falls under your umbrella and your committee's job description, then you do want to also make sure, of course, that everybody on your board is aware of what you're up to, because it's important to have buy-in at every level and for folks to just agree across the board to agree across the board that this is important and this is why we're doing it. So making sure that all the key leaders are aware, that includes your pastor. So if your pastor is not really active in the financial stewardship space, if they can give some tips on what they need to be aware of and how they can support this effort appropriately. Other key leaders here are any financial staff that you have, people that might suddenly be the ones who are aware of the gifts coming in. What do they need to know? So just making sure that folks are ready to talk about it, and also training them so that they're knowledgeable as appropriate. We do find it helpful to have 1 or 2 people that are named as if you have questions about gift planning for Central Moravian Church, reach out to Brenda. Here's contact information. That doesn't mean that Brenda has to be an expert on every kind of gift that Chris just shared, but she's the liaison and the bridge to more information. And so sometimes folks like to know who at the church, if I get this and I'm not sure what it means, who should I reach out to? So it's helpful to have a key leader that's engaged there. Finally, you want to tie these kinds of gifts to outcomes. So again, that is making sure that your church has a vision or a mission statement that's bigger, that invites people to say, I want to be a part of that, and I can do that even if I'm no longer on this earth. So having that articulated and tying these gifts to the outcomes that you hope to see is really important. If you do decide to share specific kinds of funds and invite gifts to those, maybe you already have a scholarship fund or a education fund, some endowments or funds that are already created that you want folks to consider, being able to share outcomes of those funds. Look at what we've been able to do so far. Look what more we could do and how many more kids we could serve if we had some planned guests that were coming into this fund. So again, it's always about the why. People need to know the how, and they need to know the what and all the technical details for it. But the end is always, in the beginning, is always the why and the outcomes that the church hopes to see. So all of that being said, let's see what questions you have. Feel free to unmute. We're a small group tonight. So if you want to unmute, if you've got anything to ask, we'd love to try to answer it for you.